The battlefield was fire and ruin, the ground split open by bombardments that had not ceased for 3 days, the air choked with ash and smoke, the cries of the dying lost beneath the roar of machines that seemed forged only to devour hope. Humanity's lines had crumbled, broken under the advance of an enemy that knew neither fatigue nor mercy, and yet in that collapse one man moved forward against the tide, his armor scorched, his visor cracked, his weapon little more than dead weight, but his will unbroken, because surrender was a word that had never lived in his blood. Captain Elias Rinn stumbled through craters filled with bodies and fire, his lungs burning with every breath, his vision blurred by exhaustion and blood loss, but still he pressed on, driven by a purpose he could not name, until he saw her. She was unlike any being he had carried alongside in battle, her form fragile yet radiant even in ruin, her crystalline skin glowing faintly beneath torn robes that trailed through mud and ash, her steps faltering as if every movement demanded the last of her strength. She was an elder of her people, one of the last of an ancient order that had once ruled the stars, and here she was abandoned, surrounded by war drones that closed in like vultures. Elias should have turned away, should have found cover, should have saved himself, but the sight of her collapsing in the dirt, her eyes dimming, struck him harder than any enemy fire, and without hesitation he threw himself toward her. Plasma bolts erupted around him, scorching the earth, a drone swooped low and fired bursts that lit the ground with molten glass, yet he did not falter, every step a defiance of death, every breath a vow that he would not allow this one fragile light to be extinguished. He slid beside her, grabbed her arm, and forced it across his shoulder, his body straining to hold her weight. She looked up at him, her lips parting, her voice a whisper that trembled like fragile glass, "You are human." He gritted his teeth, dragging her forward as fire lit the sky behind them. "Yeah," he spat, "and if you want to live, keep moving." She tried to resist, pride etched even in her weakness, but he carried her all the same, staggering through mud that clung to his boots, through blasts that threw molten debris across his armor, his knife flashing as he tore through a drone that came too close. Every step was agony, every heartbeat a thunder in his ears, but he did not slow. The elder's gaze lingered on him, wide with something between disbelief and awe, as though she had never seen such defiance from flesh so fragile. "You protect me," she murmured. "I don't leave people behind," Elias growled, even as blood dripped from a wound in his side. Around them the battlefield howled, human forces in retreat, alien allies shattered, the enemy pressing inexorably forward, but here on this broken ridge one man and one elder defied annihilation. By the time Elias staggered to the ridge's edge, his body was on the verge of collapse, his armor hanging in shreds, his breath ragged, his vision swimming, and still he forced himself one step further, then another, until at last his knees gave way and he fell, dragging her down with him. He gasped for air, tasting blood, his knife still clenched in one trembling hand as though daring the entire galaxy to come and finish what it had started. The elder lay beside him, her body trembling, her glow flickering weakly, but her eyes, those ancient crystalline eyes, burned with sudden fire. Slowly she raised a trembling hand, pressed it against his chest, and her voice rang not only in his ears but in his bones, resonating deeper than sound. "You carried me when hope was dead," she whispered. "You shielded me when no one else dared. For this, I give you more than thanks. I give you destiny." And then the heavens themselves split open. From the smoke-choked sky descended shapes vast as cities, their hulls shimmering with sigils of an age older than memory, engines burning with light that cast shadows across the battlefield. 50 ships, colossal and terrible, emerging as if summoned from the void itself. Human soldiers and alien remnants alike froze in awe, their gazes turned upward, their despair swallowed in a silence so profound that even the machines of war seemed to falter. The elder's eyes glowed brighter now, her voice echoing with power as she locked her gaze on Elias. 50 warships are yours." For a moment he thought he had misheard, that delirium had taken him, but the thunder of those ships answered her words, their weapons glowing, their engines rumbling like a storm called to his command. Elias stared upward, his chest rising with heavy breaths, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief, and yet in his heart he knew the truth, the tide of war had turned, not because of strategy or numbers, but because he had chosen to carry her when surrender would have been easier. The battlefield trembled beneath the roar of engines as the 50 colossal warships emerged in formation, their vast silhouettes blotting out what remained of the burning sky, and soldiers on both sides froze in awe, unable to comprehend the sight of ancient power descending to answer the voice of a dying elder and the courage of one mortal human. And Elias, broken and bloodied, felt the weight of their shadows press upon him not as doom, but as a promise that the tide had shifted, that the impossible had been seized by his defiance, and though his body screamed for rest, his spirit burned brighter than ever because he knew he could not fall now, not when an entire fleet awaited his command. The elder beside him straightened, her crystalline skin shimmering with renewed brilliance, as if his act of sacrifice had awakened something long buried within her, and she looked upon him with reverence, her voice carrying like thunder even though she spoke softly. They will not follow me any more, human, they will follow you, for you bore me across the fire when no one else dared, and in you they see what I see, a will unbroken. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to reject the absurdity of it, for he was no king, no conqueror, no commander of fleets, just a soldier who refused to die quietly, but the heavens themselves answered her words as the nearest warship's hull split open and a column of light speared down to the ground, enveloping him, and the elder in radiant energy that hummed with ancient power, and voices echoed in his mind, alien yet familiar, each one layered atop the other like a choir of eternity, acknowledging him, binding themselves to his will. His comrades, the few humans left standing, fell to their knees in disbelief, their faces streaked with blood, and ash yet their eyes shining with something they had not known in years, hope. Even the enemy hesitated, their towering machines faltering mid-advance, for they recognized what descended from the skies and feared it, as every species in the galaxy feared the lost fleet that was now awakening to serve. Elias rose, trembling but unbroken, gripping the elder's hand as strength flooded him from the light, and he lifted his head to the fleet above. "Then hear me," he rasped, his voice raw yet carried across the battlefield by something greater than sound. "These ships are not mine for conquest, they are ours for survival, and with them we will not bow, we will not break, we will drive back those who thought humanity finished, and we will rise." The warships roared in answer, their cannons igniting with energy so bright it split the smoke, and the first barrage rained down upon the enemy line, ripping Titans apart like toys, shattering their advance, and drowning the battlefield in a storm of fire that turned despair into fury. The humans who remained rallied, their battle cries echoing as they surged forward behind the curtain of alien firepower, and Elias led them, still carrying the elder as if she were the very standard of their cause, her glow lighting the way through blood and smoke. Everywhere they moved, the warships answered his intent, their weapons striking with surgical precision, shielding him and his soldiers as though the bond between man and fleet was more than command, more than chance, it was destiny carved in flame. The enemy broke, their machines stumbling back in panic, their commanders screaming across fractured channels that the Death Worlder had taken the fleet, that the legend they had mocked was now alive before their eyes, and fear greater than any weapon spread through their ranks. But Elias did not relent, his heart pounding with the rhythm of vengeance and salvation alike, his knife flashing as he cut down foes that dared come too close, his voice rising over the thunder, not as a plea but as a vow, "For every brother we buried, for every world you burned, we are coming." The elder beside him smiled faintly through her pain, her ancient eyes shimmering with tears of fire, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." The enemy lines shattered under the relentless fury of the 50 warships, fire raining from the heavens in sheets of light that cut through armor and silenced war machines that had once seemed invincible, and for the first time in years the battlefield belonged not to despair but to defiance, to the will of a human who had carried hope through fire. And Elias Ryn stood at the center of it all, chest heaving, his armor ruined, blood streaming down his side, yet his spirit unyielding as the fleet above obeyed his will as though his thoughts alone directed their wrath, striking where he looked, shielding where he stepped, a bond beyond understanding, and around him the surviving soldiers rallied, their battle cries rising with each strike, their hearts lit. Allowed himself to close his eyes, though only for a breath, because he knew that rest was a luxury they could not afford. The elder's hand touched his again, her fingers light but her presence overwhelming. "They will call you Death Worlder, but that name will no longer mean fear, it will mean hope, for with these ships you are not merely a soldier, you are the turning of the age." Elias exhaled, trying to push the weight away, but when he lifted his head and looked at the fleet, at the soldiers staring at him with eyes that begged for direction, he understood that choice had been taken from him the moment he refused to leave her behind. The battlefield smoldered beneath the shadow of the fleet, but already Elias could feel the shift of the galaxy pressing down upon him, a promise that word of this day would spread like fire, that enemies who had believed humanity broken would soon learn that a new legend had risen, and allies long silent might stir once more. He rose, his voice steady now despite the storm in his veins, and raised his knife high as if it were a blade fit for kings. This is not the end, this is the first strike. We will take these ships, and we will show the galaxy that humanity does not die in silence. We rise in fire. The roar of 50 warships answered him, their thunder rolling across the heavens, shaking the very bones of the earth, and the elder's smile deepened, her whisper carrying to him alone, 50 warships are yours, human, but soon the stars themselves may be, Ning.